Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
This is our very first podcast, and you're very welcome to be as honest and open and as clear as you want to be about the world of business as you see it. But let's start off, introduce yourselves by name, and then we'll go into a little bit more about you as we go through.
Lucy Rees-Raybould, and I'm the Chief Exec of the British Footwear Association.
Rob Jewson, I'm Chair of the Trustees of the Reach for Health Centre in Daventry.
I'm Jay Bourne, I'm the University's Social Entrepreneur in Residence.
And I'm Adeboye Dada. I'm a Senior Lecturer in Entrepreneurship.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty and all the war stories, just give me, if you can, one by one. So we'll start with Lucy again. Tell us about you as a business person and how your career began, and just a sort of potted history about your experience of business so far.
Oh, how long have you got? Came out of university, had no idea what I was going to do, so I took a job as a self-employed ad salesperson in London.
Oh, okay.
Within 6 weeks, the guy in the company had taken pity on me and gave me the job running the studio for the ads because I was rubbish at selling, and I've remained so ever since. But that led on various things that I did. Went to work for Swatch when it was huge, had a £3 million advertising budget and bought 1 million watches a year, which was quite amazing. And wind forward, I've opened my own marketing business, ran that for 10 years very profitably, then moved into a distribution business, again took that to profit, slightly different turnover. The marketing business was 500,000 and the distribution business was 10 million. Then decided I wanted to do something with a bit more give back, went to work for a buying group of independent retail jewellers, so with jewellers, small businesses, medium family businesses, and some quite big conglomerates dealing with different jewellers. And then I've transferred that skill now over to the footwear industry, where I run the British Footwear Association. So, and deal with entrepreneurs on all sorts of levels.
I bet.
Yes.
Tell me about one colourful entrepreneur you could name without naming.
Probably the most colourful. Oh God, now. Who's seeing this? Probably the most colourful entrepreneur I've met. Vivienne Westwood was amazing. Probably one of the most inspiring women I've met. But my previous boss at Goldsmiths was also an incredible entrepreneur. He bought and sold that company 6 times, made himself a lot of money. Would challenge him even if he was sitting here today on his valuation of people. He didn't value the people enough, and I learned so much from him, and that was one of the things, to value the people that you're working with and value everybody around you, because it doesn't matter who they are. The person sweeping the floor has as many good ideas as the entrepreneur. But he was amazing.
Gotcha. Rob?
I left school at 15 because my father died when I was 14. My first trip to London, living in Essex, was an interview for a job as a messenger in Mayfair. My second trip to London was to start the job a week later. I left Essex when I was 19, went to Wiltshire, took a job as a trainee manager in an organisation in Trowbridge in Wiltshire, a timber-based organisation. 10 years later, at 29, I was the youngest director ever appointed to the main board of directors. I stayed with that company for a long time, came to the Midlands as managing director of a group that our parent company had bought and made a mess of. Sorted that out, and we were taken over. I left that company, started a business of my own, which is still going very profitably today, which my daughter now has. I was invited back into the company in 1996 when I went back, because I was really only playing golf at the time. So I went back to keep myself busy and absolutely thoroughly enjoyed myself. That was with an organisation called Mayor International, which are a large UK company. Whilst I was there, we acquired various other companies. I was part of the acquisition team and the evaluation team in there. And just to repeat something, if there's one thing I've always valued throughout my career, is your greatest asset as a business is your people and nothing else. You can't do anything without people and without a team and without a team spirit. And if you want to, I was used as a troubleshooter in businesses. And if you want to know where the problems are, don't talk to the people around the board table. Go talk to the people in the sawmill or the yard and find out what's wrong with the business. That's how you begin to sort it out. They can't elaborate on what they want to say, but they can certainly give you some amazing leads as to what's wrong. So in 2002, because of illness, I had to retire. I was then only 53. I'm now only 55. But in 2000, I'd gone back to Changemaker International in 1996. In 2000, we were acquired by an international company called Saint-Gobain, who are based in France and now operate within the UK. And I was going to call it a day then. But the guy who took over our board was just an incredible guy. I got him in very well. He's an Anglicized Frenchman. He worked in America for a long time. And he asked me to stay on. So I stayed on to sort out a couple of quite large projects I had going in the UK, quite innovative projects. And he also asked me if I would look at France for him and act as a facilitator in Germany. The difference between France and Germany was quite remarkable. And then in 2002, I had to retire because of ill health. Didn't do a lot for a while, and then got involved in all sorts of different things. In 2010, I got a call from a really long-standing friend who worked for the Regional Health Centre. They're in financial difficulties, and he asked me if I could help. I went in, just an advisor. 12 years later, I'm chair of the trustees, and we're in a brand new building, purpose-built, and everything's going tickety-boo.
So tell me one learning from all these years of business.
I've learned, apart from people being your greatest asset, when I was Changemaker International, we had a chief executive called Alan Peterson. He was one of the most remarkable men I've ever met. His ability to absorb a financial document that thick was astonishing. He'd sit, and I'd accompany him sometimes on group board meetings. And he'd sit there, and they'd be talking about all the various things, and he'd say, well, what about the loss on page 57? I mean, nobody else had seen it, and he only had it for a couple of hours. The man was incredible, and I learned a huge amount from him. He believed in training people, constantly training people, and set up a sort of a mayor training camp, if you like, in Kent. And asked me, well, he didn't ask, you've got to go and do some of these and see what they're like. And I was quite proud of that, because I went down there and I was invited back as guest lecturer. And Alan said, yeah, carry on doing it. But invest in people. The future of your business, the success of your business can only come from people. It doesn't matter how good or bad your product is. If you haven't got the right people there, if they don't believe in what you're doing and what they're doing, then you're wasting your time. People, every single time it's people.
So Lucy, you've moved into different sort of sectors, industries, whatever we want to call them. Over the years, you will have seen technology creeping in. What's your perception of technology now in the world of business?
Terrifying.
Okay.
Sorry, the older you get, the more terrifying it is. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges is how fast everything is moving, how much technology can change your business. But if you come to rely on it too much, you end up with the situation that a lot of people ended up with in COVID, which is that actually you've got no support network because you don't know how to operate without a constant and direct stream of that technology. And I think that is, I pride myself in that I can pick up and use a tape gun in the warehouse as well as a lot of the systems. But I think you do also have to accept as an entrepreneur, as you grow in business, that you can't do everything and you don't need to become an expert in everything. So for me, technology is about pulling in experts today and not trying to be one yourself, because I think that's my big fear, I think.
So as an executive in the space, what are you looking for from young people coming in terms of their understanding of the modern business world?
Oh, that's a challenge. I think they need to be using the right language around technology, but being able to speak to you, and that's me, as a non-user, so that actually they can bring their experience to the table and not frighten me. Because if they don't frighten me, then I know they won't frighten the people around me. And we're dealing with a lot of people who are passionate about what they do, absolutely passionate. They've got this phenomenal idea for a business and they want to move it forward. And it was the same in jewellery, whether it was a new jewellery invention, but actually they don't know anything about anything else other than whatever idea they've had for that business. And therefore, you need to find people who can converse on your level.
Gotcha. Rob, what about yourself? I mean, obviously I've got an insight into what you do now, but what's your view on technology?
But I look at technology in a slightly different way. I think technology has been amazing in terms of improving administration and accounting, improving communication has been mind-blowing, and COVID really stepped that forward. And technology also is the undoing of our high street, because I'm a terrible user of Amazon. The vans are normally queuing up most mornings, because you can order something in the evening and it arrives the following morning. You don't even have to get in your car. So technology, there are bad sides to technology, there's good sides to technology. But the way I look at it, we have at the Reach for Health Centre, we look after people with anything from a twisted ankle to a stroke survivor. Or, it's right across the piece, any illness. The one we hate is MND, but motor neuron disease. There's so little you can do. It's just awful. But anything else, whether it's pulmonary, whether it's heart, whether it's whatever, we'll look after people and we'll improve their lot. And one of the biggest challenges is in neurological conditions, because it's a wiring problem. Someone has a stroke and they can't use their right hand on their right arm or their right leg. It's because the nervous system isn't getting the messages through. Now, I don't believe that pharmaceuticals will ever solve that problem, but I absolutely believe that technology will. So part of the things we're doing at the centre, we've just partnered with a brand new organisation testing artificial intelligence for the benefit of neurological conditions and improving people's mobility and dexterity. And I absolutely believe that is going to work. I totally believe it. Because it makes sense, and I'm no expert in the field of medicine or rehabilitation by any stretch of imagination. I know how to put a plaster on, but that's about as far as it goes. But if I look at it in pure common sense terms, I have a lot of vascular issues, but my body has found different routes to get the blood supply to where it needs to through various blood vessels. Now, I believe the nervous system can do the same. The difference is that the communication comes from a different part of the brain. So a different part of the brain has to be taught to send a signal that another part of the brain should be sending. Now, I believe that can happen. Our bodies are so remarkable at adapting to problems that we have that I believe that can happen. So, I think technology is a truly amazing thing. And I watch my grandchildren, and they're so clever.
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
I have a granddaughter, 89, who's very arty, and she uses a piece of software called Procreate. If you see what she does on that, she's teaching me. And, and I sit because I've got Procreate because I'm a little bit arty. And she says, no, Gramps, you don't do it like that. You do it like this. And it's just remarkable. So I think technology is, children should categorically not be denied. They should be controlled but not denied. Because their future is going to be technology-based. It has to be, because that's the way we're going as a world.
I just want to take a little bit more of a pragmatic sort of entrepreneur, what makes up an entrepreneur. From your approach, Lucy, in terms of how you look at business leadership, what you look for to tell you that the business is working, how does that, I know it's developed over time, but how does that work now as a process for you?
I think You've got to
asking all questions.
It's awkward questions, and I have to get them first, and then you have time to think about them. It's just not fair. I think it. Sorry, can you repeat the question? No.
Two sugars.
Yeah.
Two sugars.
Oh, is that what it was? That's right. I think for me, you've got to keep looking at all aspects of the business. Rob and I were talking before we came on about the importance of finances, but actually you've got to keep an eye on your finances. That's fundamental. And if you ask the one, other than the people, because the people will get you through the finance, but you've got to have money. And every single business is going to cost you more than you expect it to. It always does. It doesn't matter what you think you're going to do. It doesn't matter how fast you think you're going to grow. Something is going to knock you off that course. So I think it's staying open-minded about that as well. Okay. And just thinking, it can't be fixed. You've got to be open to change. You've got to be open to bend and take a different path towards your end goal. But know where the end goal is.
Okay. So can I build on those insightful evidence that you've given us? And thank you so much for letting us know that technology plays a significant role in entrepreneurship as well as finance. But if I just want to know more, or want you to say a bit more on what has been the biggest challenge to you as an entrepreneur, and what were you able to do?
After you
putting it on a scale. What has been the biggest challenge?
You go first, Rob.
Yeah, Rob, please.
There aren't any. They're just hurdles.
Oh.
It's. I think if you're going to succeed in anything, whether it's entrepreneurship or anything else, you need two things: belief and belief. If you believe in what you're doing, if you believe you're able to do it, and you truly believe there's a way forward, you will always find a way. I say to the team at the Regional Health Centre, there is no such thing as standing still. That is stagnating. Because while you're standing still, everybody else is moving forward. So you can't stand still. You have to keep going forward. You have to accept change, which is what you've said. The world is a changing place, sadly in bad ways as well as good at the moment. But if you don't accept change, if you don't believe that you can overcome hurdles, and a lot of them you don't know till they occur anyway. You can get halfway through something and something comes out of the blue that you're not expecting. Just deal with it and get over it. There's always somebody out there that will help you if you can't do it yourself. It's a matter of persuading. I persuade him to do all sorts of things.
That's unofficial.
But you have to believe in what you're doing. And the people around you, and choose those people. And this sounds ruthless, but if you've got people with you that really aren't any good, get rid of them and replace them with people that are. And that sounds hard, but with some of them, you can see there's an element of something coming out of them. So you nurture that and you train them and bring them up. But sometimes you've got the wrong people. When I took over the charity, I had trustees who really, all they wanted to do was come to the monthly meetings, drink the tea and eat the biscuits. That's no good to me. They've gone. I now have a lawyer, a doctor, a professor. They're the people that can really help the charity. And if my belief is that the charity can do better, and I'm trying to take it from one centre in Daventry to initially 25 centres spread across the UK at a minor cost of £130 million, then, if I don't believe in that, it won't happen. And I've got to do it quickly because I probably won't be around for much longer to see it happen. So it's really important to get the thing going. That's where this guy is helping me. So
he's got the checkbook with the 130 million.
129.
Oh, is it? Well, can I have the million?
Have the million. So it's belief, Eddie.
Thank you.
You have to believe in what you're doing.
One thing we've seen in practice and also in the extant literature on entrepreneurship is that when people face with obstacle, there are two options. Is either they keep going, but when they keep going, they might fall again. So
no,
if
no,
you
no,
keep
no.
falling,
When you come up
get
against
knocked down.
when you come up against a brick wall,
Yes.
you have to be smart enough to realize you're not going to break through it. So go round it. Sometimes
you do have to keep getting up.
You do have to keep getting
and
up.
to find a new way. And I suppose getting up is about finding a new path. You have to be prepared that although you've got a very clear end goal in mind, whatever it is, I'm going to be the next Kanye West or whatever. Well, I don't know, because I don't know why I suddenly thought of Kanye West.
Boy?
I don't know. I think I'm not even going to say anything because I'll offend millions of people. Prue Leith, let's say. Prue Leith. If you're going to be Prue Leith and you have a vision for how you want food to be in your life, you're going to keep going down there. But if you'd asked Prue Leith 40 years ago whether she was going to go on to Bake Off on the television, she wouldn't have known that was ever even in her mind. So it's being prepared to take on board whatever comes. Look at everything. Every time you fall over, it's an opportunity to stand up in a different way. I think one of my things, which I repeat a lot, Federer says he prefers to lose a tennis match than win, because every time he loses, his game gets better.
Yeah.
And I think that's what entrepreneurs should hold on to. Yes, you're going to hit challenges. Yes, you're going to have obstacles. They're going to knock you down. You're going to find walls that you've got to walk around. Every time you do, your path, your steps are stronger. You learn something and you take it with you and you grow and you get faster and closer to your success.
I think the other thing to remember is what I used to do a lot of team building, team training. And what I said to them is you need to have ambitions. So you need to have your dot on the horizon that you're aiming for. But there's other dots on your journey to get there that you have to achieve, otherwise you're not going to get there. But whilst you're achieving the other dots, that dot on the horizon will move, because everything changes. And if you don't recognize that you've got to adjust your path as you're going towards it, you won't achieve it. And I think entrepreneurship, there's different types of entrepreneurs. There are very greedy entrepreneurs. Richard Branson comes to mind immediately. And they're there really for their own self-gratification, their own rewards, to enjoy the money that they get and everything else. There are other entrepreneurs that do it because it's really great fun to do. To see something flourish and to see something grow and to see something come out of failure to success, which is always tremendously rewarding. But then there's other entrepreneurs that do it for the benefit of others. So, and some of them are a complete mix of all three. So there are all sorts of different, entrepreneur isn't a single title. It's a multiple title from multiple different types of characters and personalities that operate within it. And there are some very clever, very smart people that are doing some fantastic jobs. And the rewards they're getting are actually quite small relative to what they're putting.
You and I, actually.
You and I, I'm thinking about that, actually. Yeah, but you know, the rewards aren't there. But there are different types of rewards, aren't there? You know, there's rewards for you've actually put something back. You've actually helped people. You can see people get better. At the Reef Health Centre, it's a place of smiles and tears. You know, and sometimes those tears are of joy. You know, when someone who hasn't got out of a wheelchair for 2 years is suddenly in what we call our monorail, which is a suspense system, is actually bearing their weight. They're supported, but they're bearing their weight and they're putting one foot in front of the other. And they've got tears running down their cheeks. We've got tears running down their cheeks, and their partners have got tears running down their cheeks. And it's such an amazing thing to happen. You know, and that's what gives me the inspiration to say, I have to get this better. You know, we're in a society that is almost entirely reactive. We react to everything. Our NHS service is 100% reactive. All right, let's say 99, because they do some proactive stuff. They can't be anything else because they were designed to be reactive. And in 1948, when the NHS was established, it was so that when people were sick, they could go to the NHS. Not before they were sick, but when they were sick. And it's been like that ever since. We have to do something about that. we're in a society where the population is older than it's ever been before because people are living longer, sometimes being kept alive longer. And unless we become proactive and we enable those people to be healthier for longer in their later years, the NHS will be totally and utterly overwhelmed.
Isn't that actually suggests another debate, which I'm not suggesting we have today, but actually about how we stop reactivity. And actually, I think that's the other piece about entrepreneurs have to take a breath before they react.
I agree.
Because if you just react all the time, and you know, we actually in the footwear industry also have an ongoing debate about the fact that the NHS should be proactive, not reactive, because they sort out back problems and hip problems, which actually, if everybody went and got their feet measured and were in proper fitting shoes, we wouldn't have back problems and foot problems and hip problems.
But I think what we have to recognise, the NHS cannot be proactive.
I wasn't suggesting it.
No, they can't be proactive.
No.
They've got 7 million backlog, so it's going to be years before they can even begin to start.
But education, we can get government to use education to help teach people how to be proactive in themselves for their own health.
Or
and
you can
lots
give
of other
me
things.
130 million and I'll do it for them.
Well, no, because
get that.
So let's talk about reactiveness then in the business context. So 2.5, 3 years ago, Neely, COVID.
Yeah.
So each of you will have experienced COVID as it hit you.
Yes.
And I think for our audience, this is going to be a real sort of, what did you do to adapt? So I'm going to come to you first, Lucy.
He likes me better.
Usual.
He likes me better than you.
You are in a sector that immediately probably suffered big time. So what happened and what did you do? What did you experience?
Well, it was... Obviously, we suddenly had to work from home. So we were a very small team, and it was reasonably easy for us to adapt. But we then went on to have internally quite some staffing difficulties. One of our staff couldn't actually position themselves at home in a comfortable place because their home was so small, so we had to let them come back into the office, but they were then alone 4 days a week, and that was a really bad thing. We then had to support them through a breakdown. We had another member of staff who through COVID just couldn't cope with the isolation that being at home all day meant. We had no choice. From a member's point of view, actually, it gave us suddenly a dialogue with our members that we hadn't had before. And I think it's been, for me, running the BFA, I only joined 6 months before COVID hit. It gave me an opportunity to talk and to support. So we came up with help. We had factories all over Northampton. Literally, they were ringing me from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. What are we going to do about this? How can we cope? Because you had two things. One is you can't run a shoe factory from home. Big point. The factory's got no money. How's it going to pay its staff? I mean, you talked about crying. I cannot tell you how many tears I cried the day Rishi Sunak announced the furlough scheme. It was
amazing.
It was so. It was game changing. It was like we'd suddenly got, you know, the ability to walk again, and for not for the companies themselves, but for the people that work for them, the amazing people here in Northampton that work for all those factories, but across the business, with all the retailers suddenly, and nobody wanted shoes, slippers. Yes, we all wanted slippers. Nobody could believe the slipper thing, and that's another nice little story. So the planners for yeah, sorry, I'll shut up. But it's a nice story. No, because it's about adapting and about looking back and using that information. So slippers went through the roof. Absolutely amazing.
They're on the floor.
They are, most of the time, until you throw them at your husband.
I don't know.
Okay. How many times have you been hit with? But the planners looked at the plans, the sales levels from 2020 for slippers. Whoop! Let's reorder them for 2021. Well, we were all out and about in 2021. Nobody wanted slippers in the same. So we're having to say, don't order that many. So It's just about taking that information and adapting. So, sorry.
So I think from a business context then, what sort of behaviours did you see going on?
Oh, panic. I mean, you had really intelligent, I had really intelligent senior directors, CEOs from all over the shoe business, some of them crying down the phone with me. They did not know how they were going to cope. People who were ringing me in desperation. It's funny, I was only saying the other day, one particular CEO, senior CEO in the footwear industry, was ringing me every week through COVID. I haven't heard from him for the last year, but he was ringing me every week. What do I do? Just having to offload. And I think that was something, what am I going to do about my members and where?
So it sounds to me as if there was a fair bit of unusual networking and collaborative chats.
Totally. And, this industry was really bad at talking. And one of the things we set up early on was a Zoom network group. In fact, we set up 4 in the end because they became so popular. And the same group still meets tomorrow morning, actually, at 8 o'clock in the morning. We'll meet for an hour. Well, it's supposed to be an hour. It's in my diary for an hour, and it ends up being nearly an hour and a half, 2 hours, because they just then share what's happening, what the challenges are, offloading. And I think that's something else that we forget as business leaders, is that you do need somebody to talk to, that you do need somebody to share, and you can't do that with your staff. You can't do that with people with vested interests. Entrepreneurs, you can't go to your wife or husband or brother or sister because they have a vested interest. Find yourself a mentor. And I think that's what the role that we took, is that we presented ourselves as a mentor in some way, just to feed back to those people what they were saying, let them talk and offload. And I think it's really important to find yourself a mentor when you're running as an entrepreneur. It's pretty key, I would say, to have somebody. You mentioned your chappie with the big, thick financial documents. Your CEO, I imagine he offered.
Well, I was lucky. I from when I was probably in my mid-20s, I had a mentor who was already a director of the company I was made a director of initially. And he was probably still my mentor right up until I retired in 2002.
Wow. You're very lucky.
I was extremely lucky. He was a man I greatly admired. He wasn't the CEO, he was somebody else. He was a man I greatly admired. And we got on extraordinarily well. If I had a problem, I'd always go to him and let him play devil's advocate. Because sometimes when you're trying to develop a business or solve a business, you come up with the ideas, but you've got no one to test them on, really.
Yeah.
And I would go to Ken and say, Ken, this is what I'm doing. What do you think? And he'd just, with me, take it apart and put it back together again. And in the end, okay, sounds like a good scheme to me. And you go ahead with a little bit more confidence. I've never lacked in confidence, which is a great failing of mine.
Really?
But yeah, but you go ahead with a little bit more security in yourself, if you like, to do it. But you talk about COVID, and you talk about COVID and difficulties. If I look back with the charity, in 2016, I approached Daventry District Council and said, I got £1.5 million to build a purpose-built centre to help the people around here. We're in a unit that we were heating 2/3 of Daventry because it had a single skin asbestos roof. It had no flow in it. It was too small. When it rained, we had buckets around the place collecting
It sounds
water.
like most of my factories.
When you went into what was the foyer and the reception and the kitchen, it was tiny, so you couldn't have any social side with people that were coming into the centre or their carers. And now, if you take all of that, it fits inside our reception desk at the new centre. But in 2016, I went to approach them. The answer was categorically no. There is no way on this earth we're going to do it. Anyway, in 2020, we opened a new £1.5 million centre in Daventry on the 2nd of November. On the 19th of November, I had to close it because of COVID. And you can imagine, to go through that time, working with other trustees, getting grants and all sorts of things in to equip the centre. Nearly £250,000 worth of kit went in there. And that was way beyond us when we started it. But again, it's going back to what you and I were saying about belief.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, we'll find a way of doing it. And we did find a way of doing it, and we did equip the centre, and we have put some amazing specialist equipment in there as well as standard equipment. But we had to close it, and that brings about a different mix of pressures, because you've got all those 400 or 500 people that can't have access to the building and need access to the building. A lot of them are living alone at home. So what on earth do you do? So I said to Tim, it's easy. We do it online. So in a week, the team at the Reach Health Centre had set up a whole range of offerings to our members, all delivered to home, all delivered online, all done from the centre. We'd work with the university, with the occupational therapy faculty. They'd set up a helpline. So we'd booked telephone numbers. Anybody living on their own, anybody concerned, had a helpline to OTs, and they had a route round to us as well. And we worked all our way through COVID, in and out, running an online rehabilitation to people, which was hilarious, because some of them, technology, they can't even use a biro. I mean, it was, no, you have to push that button. And I'd hear the coaches and they'd be saying, no, Mary, you've got to help him out. He needs to push the button that says so. And it was great fun, and it worked. And I think because of the type of organisation we are, the charity we are, the one thing that kept us going was over 300 members maintained their monthly subscription all the way through the time we were closed in COVID. They converted it to a donation so that we could claim gift aid on it, which is another 25%. Without that, I'm not even sure we would be here. I worked with another one of my trustees. We got grants from the lottery fund. We got grants from all sorts of places, to enable us to get through it. And I'm really proud of the fact we actually came out of COVID with more money in the bank than we went in. And that's quite an achievement to do that, really. And that's a testament to the dedication of the team I've got working around me at the Reach for Health Centre. And the furlough was just amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, Rishi Sunak, there's so many businesses that wouldn't be here without him making that move.
Totally.
It would have gone completely.
I want to just pick up on tenacity.
What's that?
Something you really don't have.
No, clearly not. So an entrepreneur meets a brick wall, finds a way around it, has belief. But a lot of people went through COVID. Their determination was tested. Their mental health, some people lived on their own. Some people were disconnected in ways, because a lot of people thrive on that human interaction, don't they?
Yes.
So for me, each of you have a tenacity, clearly, because you wouldn't be sitting where you are today, and there's certainly the stories that you're giving us. So what makes you tenacious?
It's back belief. It's a belief in being able to achieve things.
Even when you're feeling low, when you're clearly unwell, as you have been.
Well, when do you feel low?
Okay.
I don't very often feel low. If I do, it's because I need chocolate. I don't really feel low.
So I find that a lot of young entrepreneur aspirees,
I get frustrated.
They say, "Oh, I've got to have a fire in my belly. I shouldn't be feeling the way I am. I haven't got any energy today." So what drives you, Lucy? What keeps you going?
The people.
Okay.
Feed from the people around you, and I think that comes to positive energy too. Goodness, you wouldn't be human if there weren't days when you were just like, "Oh, really? I don't want to get out of bed today. I just want to stay here and hide away from what I know." Even last night, something happened yesterday, and one of our really important members sent me a very grumpy email. I've had 2 grumpy emails from really important members in the last week. But you just have to keep pushing through, because the people around you, because you know that those are 2 grumpy emails, you probably caught the people on the wrong day, said slightly the wrong thing. They have forgotten. I'm still worrying. And I think it's just accepting who you are, knowing looking at yourself as well, being self-aware. I think that's something very much. What makes a change in you? So watch yourself, read yourself a lot, and feed off those people around you, because they can change everything. I mean, Rob's lucky, because I think what you see every single day of your life is miraculous. But there will be sad moments within that, and frustrating moments within that. But you see a lot of happiness. It's not quite the same selling shoes. I mean, I don't get to hear when somebody's got an amazing order from Marks and Spencer's that's going to change their fortune. But I do get to speak to some amazing entrepreneurs who've got the best idea in the world. It's mad, but it's the best idea in the world. And I think also, I would say one of the things that entrepreneurs have to do is listen to other people and be prepared to accept that they're not always right, that you as an entrepreneur are not always right. If somebody says to you, well, I've got a lot of experience, and actually you can't, somebody has already invented slippers with fairy linings. You aren't the first. Just because you haven't managed to find them on the internet doesn't mean they don't exist. So talk to people. How could we adapt it so that it is unique?
Reflecting through COVID-19, and you've given some very constructive evidence of what's happened and how you've been able to tackle some of the obstacles and challenges arriving from COVID-19. Reflecting on that, what would you have thought could have been done better in your approaches?
In terms of us as individuals? Or?
Yeah, as individual and as a company,
do you know, I think,
as an entrepreneur.
I think COVID-19, it's probably one of the few times in my life I've actually been very concerned, because you can normally see part of the way through things, and if you can see part of the way, you can get the rest as you're travelling, can't you? Do you understand what I mean?
Totally.
You've got something to hang on to, it will draw you through. With COVID, certainly in my lifetime, it's the first time I've seen the nation face a pandemic to that scale and to pull the nation literally to its knees. And I'm operating an organisation that doesn't make a profit. Everything we make goes back into the charity, and we need a bank account, we need money in the bank to survive, but it all goes back into the charity. And I guess one of the moments really that came out is that there were small business grants, do you remember? Based upon your rateable value on your premises. And I rang the local authority and said, I'm sorry, you don't qualify. And I said, what do you mean we don't qualify? And they said, well, you're a charity, you're not a business. And that's a bit of a blow, when you think, well, hang on a minute, there are an awful lot of charities that do an incredible amount of good, and you're saying, no, I'm sorry, we're just going to give it to people who make profits and pay dividends, which I do believe in. That was probably the first time. But then you think, well, hang on, there has to be a way around this. And there was, and I got the small business grant, and I won't tell you why, because I'm not sure it's entirely legal. But
that's the unofficial.
That is what entrepreneurs do, though. They rewrite the rule books.
There's the line.
Yes,
and it did help. But and then you sit down with the trustee, and probably like your team, you've always got one or two people you're closer to than anybody else, because they really work with you. And I've got a fabulous trustee called Carolyn Howe, who's just the most remarkable lady. And she and I said, whatever happens, we're going to find a way of dealing with this. And she was an absolute rock beside me in finding the means to be able to get the income that we needed to keep the charity going. And when you got that sort of support, so you're not doing it on your own, it really does make a difference, and you're more successful, and you can pull each other's legs and squash each other's ideas. But we did do it, and we got, well, I won't tell how much we got, but we got an awful lot of money through in grants, and all of it was great, and the people that supported us were absolutely amazing. And it was everything from the lottery fund to local businesses to the Sir Optimist, which is a ladies' organisation, which you may know of. It comes out of America. It's run entirely by ladies. They've been incredibly supportive of the charity, and they operate out of Rugby. And when you got that level of support, it just gives you that inspiration to carry on and to get things done and to do things, And when you got, I'm blessed with the most amazing team at the Reach for Health Centre. The coaches, most of them are really quite young, but they're absolutely, well, you've seen them in action, they're absolutely superb. and we get some astonishing students from the university, that come on placements, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, sports rehabilitation. We've employed 2 of them. So, it's just a tremendous place to be. And COVID was a massive challenge to any organisation. And an awful lot of organisations failed. And I think a lot of them failed not because of inabilities or doing things wrong. It's just the world stopped. And when the world stops, there isn't very much you can do about it, really. So you have to accept there will be casualties.
So that's the most extreme sort of version of that brick wall, isn't it?
My only determination was we were not going to be one of those casualties. And thank goodness we weren't, And times are hard now. As a charity, you're still desperately trying to get funds because our income doesn't match our expenditure. There's always a shortfall every month, so we have to find ways and means of getting that money from elsewhere.
Same as us.
Same as you, yeah.
Totally.
It's a tough situation to be in. And now it's particularly tough because people, are being stretched. So they have to find other routes. And there's always other routes. There has to be. Otherwise, we all may as well give up.
And I think that's the other piece of this, actually, that COVID's not over yet. We think it is, but it absolutely isn't. I mean, for my industry in particular, we still have massive problems in China. And with what's happened in China in the last week, that shows a sign of something very different. We've seen a huge shift in China as a country from manufacturing point of view. They have moved away from wanting to manufacture. They used to supplement the factories to create a footwear factory. Within China, those aren't. They've changed their rules on some of the importation of materials that we need for shoes. I mean, they do make a lot of materials there, but they've changed some of the rules. So there is a shifting happening. And I don't think also that we've seen the end of the impact of COVID layered with Brexit. And I think one of the things, certainly for my industry, for footwear, and I would say for most people in the consumer goods world, Brexit has been as destructive. And you can't separate those two things for most businesses because we had COVID. And before you'd stood up and started working again properly, you were then facing the horrendous challenges. And my big bugbear at the moment, do you know that Selfridges, Harrods, Fortnum and Masons still can't send goods into Europe? 3 of the largest retail organisations in the country can't sell.
All I would say is, you mentioned China. I think the one thing we haven't seen yet is the full detrimental impact of China. I shouldn't talk about China because I get very angry. I don't like the Chinese. I don't like Chinese philosophy. I don't like the Chinese way of life. But they are potentially the biggest destruction on the planet, commercially and economically.
But they hold us completely.
That's our fault, not theirs.
And yes, sorry, they hold us. It sounded.
I know what you're going to say.
But in terms of our reliance on the Chinese, everybody's talking about nearshoring product. I had a very interesting conversation with somebody today who said the carbon footprint of producing in Turkey is the same as producing in China because the impact of bringing your goods from Turkey by road versus sea from China is actually greater. So you have to be careful, but we rely on Chinese manufacturing for all our materials, for all the elements. And I think we don't realise, the general public have no concept of.
So what do you think drives that? Do you think that's supply chains and the cost to run them cheaply? And therefore businesses built on fragile foundations?
Yeah, I think we've taken it for granted, actually.
But it's also, you can take profit out of the supply chain by managing it more effectively.
Yes.
And I don't think we're doing that necessarily. No. And we should be. If you look at particularly large organisations, manufacturing organisations, yeah, one of my priorities, if I was running it, would be to look at that supply chain in detail and take whatever profit out of it I possibly could by taking people out of the supply chain. And one of the problems, you know, Lucy's saying, one of the problems we have is that the influence of China is so severe.
Or our reliance on, rather than influence. I think it's our reliance on China.
It's impossible to manage without them.
You can't unpick.
But they are raping the planet in order to supply us with the things that we need to manufacture things, or they're manufacturing it and selling it to us. It's difficult to buy anything that hasn't got made in China on it. I'm surprised you don't pick up potatoes and it says made in China on the bottom of the potato, because there's almost everything that you pick up is made in China.
You think about leather, and we tan leather, and everybody's very proud of the fact we tan leather in Europe. But the chemicals to make the tannery come from China. You know,
where do they get them from? Africa.
But it's, you know, we are reliant in ways that we don't even begin to realise.
But if you've got a situation, take that as an example, and I'm not sure it's true, but if you've got the chemicals to tan leather, and tanneries stink, don't they?
Yes.
They smell absolutely diabolically. When I was a lad, I sold timber to a tannery, and I hated going in there.
Yeah, it's an unbelievably awful.
Even when you went home and showered 3 times, you still couldn't get rid of the smell.
Yeah.
It was horrible. Don't go into tanneries.
Do go into tanneries.
They are amazing.
They don't smell like they used to. They are much nicer places.
They are amazing. What they do with the skin of an animal, a cow normally, is just remarkable. Absolutely.
And also remember, everybody who's listening. No, but hang on. Leather is a byproduct, everybody. Buy leather shoes, because otherwise it's going to go into landfill. Just saying.
Absolutely.
Putting my little bit in there.
Moving this on to entrepreneurship. We're going off on a tangent.
All I'm saying there is if we're in a position where we're buying chemicals from China to tan leather, but they're getting those chemicals from Africa, take the Chinese out, pay the Africans the value of the chemicals that they're producing, and bring them straight to the UK.
Yeah.
You're solving a problem in Africa. You're beginning also to solve a problem in China, but you're shortening the supply chain, you're taking profit out of the supply chain, and you are spreading that profit fairly, not unfairly, as is happening in a lot of cases.
So I'm gonna switch this now, because otherwise it's going to go down an alleyway. Yeah. Have you any other questions before I open it to the audience?
Yeah. Well, still on COVID-19.
You're obsessed with COVID-19,
It's just because of the fact that we've learned great lessons from the experience, and based on your reflection and evidence that you've given us, it shows that obviously both individuals and organizations have been affected, and still, of course, we can see the multiplying
almost exclusively
effect on it. And I like your argument, Lucy, looking at it from Brexit into COVID-19, then now into inflation. Then one could ask that environment is not stable. What if the big COVID-19 repeats its occurrence? What should we do? What if?
It won't.
Adapt.
Yeah, just adapt.
But it will be a different thing.
It'll be a different virus.
We are going to have something.
Yeah.
It may be environmental. You know, England's an island at the end of the day. That seawater rises too much. We're going to be in the same position as Mauritius.
Not sat here, we're not.
I'm not sure, actually. We come upstairs.
No, we're safe.
I think the reason we're not going to know whether we came out of COVID-19 properly until the students sitting in the audience's children look back.
Yeah.
Because we can't see it, and actually we sit here and go, oh, we got through that okay, but did we really? We are not going to see those impacts.
I think from my perspective, I joined the university just after COVID, but it was still COVID because we kept going into lockdown. So in January of last year, I came here, and it was very clear that a lot of students were looking at entrepreneurship as a career route, maybe into business to become a business sort of entrepreneur or startup. But a lot have realised the real benefit of digital sort of deliveries, digital sort of processes. So maybe COVID has taught us to be less reliant on the bricks, the mortar, the people to a large extent, more on AI, more on collaborative partnerships and supply chains and things like that. So I guess my final question before we switch out to the audience will be, do you think the younger generation coming through now as our next flow of entrepreneurs have a completely different viewpoint to your own?
Yes, I think that.
Totally.
They do. But I'm concerned about their isolation. Hugely concerned about their isolation. Because the one thing COVID did was it stopped networking. It stopped a lot of social benefits that come out of going into a workplace. It stopped a lot of mentoring one-to-one.
Yeah.
You know, when you get employees that are fairly close to each other, they've got someone to talk to. They've got a problem in work. They know they've got a colleague. They can say, "Hey, give me a hand with this. I'm really struggling with this one. Help me get a head around it." COVID has brought around about I think a different type of problem. I think we've got to deal with the more isolated approach that our intelligent younger people are having to take, and that concerns me greatly because I'm a great believer in interaction with people. I think that's what makes the world a fabulous place. And I think you guys, all I'd say to you is try and get back into, bricks and mortar are seriously important. You can't work in isolation. You don't function properly. Your brain, your mind, your attitude doesn't function properly. When you're surrounded by people, it generates its own energy, and you find you spark off each other and you achieve things far greater than you will sat at home staring at a picture which happens to be you on a screen or somebody else on a screen, and behind you you've got an image of Venice because that's what you're allowed to do under whatever video system you're using. It's not real. The real part is being with other people and interacting with other people. That's what matters.
I think the other element of that actually is when you're an entrepreneur, if all you're doing is looking at a screen and having that lack of personal connection, you're going to miss the subliminal messages from the communication. So we're sitting here now and it's amazing the amount of feedback that we're each picking up from each other instinctively. And I think fundamentally, somebody on a screen will tell you, well, I think there's a little problem with your idea, but what you're not picking up is how big a problem they think that actually is, because they're remaining polite and you're hearing on the screen. You're not getting those subliminal messages. And I think that's something fundamentally, which is where I come back to my beginning comment about being scared of technology, because I think it takes away that human element, which is fundamentally important to us if we're going to develop. You cannot do it in the isolation of your bedroom. And I think COVID has shown us that. It's showing us now the dramatic impact on children because they didn't mix, they didn't get out. And if you're going to do anything, go into child services, because we are going to need that support for the generation of sub 7-year-olds who've gone through COVID are going to absolutely need lots of psychological help. And elderly. I mean, they couldn't even go out to, it's terrible what we've gone through. So sorry.
You should do what I did and break the rules.
So I'm going to push it out. Are there any questions in the audience?
Okay, thank you very much. It's been really interesting. So here at the university, we teach entrepreneurship, and it's a subject at both undergraduate and postgraduate level. What are the areas that you think should be prioritised in terms of teaching young people how to effectively become entrepreneurs?
Honesty and truthfulness. I think there's a huge amount of belief in a younger generation that you can shortcut things, you can do things in, let's say, a slightly underhand way. But I think if there's one thing I've learned over the years to value more than anything else, it's absolute honesty. If you got something wrong, tell somebody you've got it wrong. If I have somebody come to me from any team that I've managed over the years and have said to me, I really can't solve this problem, what should I do? And I said, well, go away and think about it again, because until you come back with an idea, I'm not going to tell you how to solve it. So that they have to give it some thought. It doesn't matter if they're wrong. It doesn't matter in the least, because you can show them where they've gone wrong, and you can help them develop a system of solving that problem or taking whatever it is forward. But I just think that there's not a sufficient belief in honesty now, and I think honesty, integrity are incredibly important things, and you cannot genuinely succeed without them in anything, let alone entrepreneurship, but anything at all.
Not taking away from that, because that's fundamentally where I come from as a person, and I think it is quite hard if you aren't an honest person fundamentally. Then it's very difficult to teach that. But you
can't. You can keep pushing it in there.
I think there are two things which entrepreneurs, in my experience, have lacked, and that is a financial understanding, how to calculate a margin, understanding who you're selling your product to, or who your end consumer is, whether that's business to business or that you need to know how it's going to get paid for, what margin you want to make, and what margin that person's going to make. So and research. Find out who your competition is, find out who's doing something similar, talk to people, listen to people, read as much as you can, because actually I think often, so many times, and I get a lot of people writing to me, I've had an amazing idea about footwear and they haven't actually gone and thought about where they're going to sell it, who's going to buy it. They want it for themselves. Well, they may be the one person in this 68 billion people in the world that wants that thing. Go and find out. And I think how to research, how to use the internet is something that would be invaluable for them to learn. And calculating margin. Please teach them how to calculate margin.
That is such a major problem. I used to go, if you say to somebody, we've marked it up 50%, what's our gross margin? They said 50%. It's not, it's a third. Your margin is calculated on your selling price, not on your buying price. And it's difficult to get that across. It's
sometimes. Really difficult, and I think it's fundamental.
And it's easy maths. You mark up a third, you make 25%. You mark up 50, if you mark up 100%, you make 50%. It's because it's calculated on your selling price. But yeah, I guess where you're coming from is, if there's one thing you do need, it's good, sound financial management. You don't have to be an accountant. You just need good. Good. And if there's one thing I have learned is how to read a profit and loss account, because my goodness, does that hold so many secrets? Because there are things in a profit and loss account you cannot hide.
Yeah.
And that is a route to a business, finding out what's wrong with a business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Vaishnav, from MBA student from University of Northampton. I thank you for sharing your thoughts and experiences with us. And I would like to ask you a question, since it's related to COVID. We had COVID. It was like unpredicted disaster that came in our lives. So do you think as entrepreneurs, we should have some kind of preparedness for upcoming disasters? Like maybe it can be any government policy or anything which we cannot think about. So should we be prepared about it, or just go with the flow?
I don't think you have a choice but to go with the flow, because we can't predict, sadly, what it's going to be. And I think you just have to be open-minded and not dig your feet in and try and turn the tide back. If the tsunami's coming at you, run.
Or swim.
Don't go.
No, be flexible.
Yeah.
If you can tell us what the next pandemic is going to be, we'll help you find a solution to it. But unfortunately, you can't. So if you don't know what it's going to be, all you can be is open-minded and flexible.
And I think actually insurance companies spend billions of pounds a year predicting what's going to happen, and they didn't have a pandemic clause in anybody's cost. So actually, we can't predict. We just have to be prepared to be open-minded enough to allow whatever's happening to happening and make the most of it.
I think what you can do is you can build a business model that's agile.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a really good
and it's
word.
thinking about things that, like, we had to spin businesses, pivot businesses, I think it's the word that was
Total.
used during COVID.
Yeah.
So people learnt really, really well how to pivot. So
Flexibility and
codified
agility.
pivoting, yes.
Yeah.
And you say, well, that we could do this if that happened. So you're sort of almost training for a race, but any athlete will tell you once you get in the race, the dynamics are what they are. So it's about understanding your business model, the way you build your business model, enough to say, well, could this adapt? Is it too rigid? Are you more reliant on China? Could you have another supply chain area that you're potentially going to focus on? That's what I would say.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your inputs. I'm Mercy. I'm doing an MBA here as well. Question I'd have is in line of you're a student, and once you're done with your course, at what point do you draw the line between going into employment and going into entrepreneurship? Is it something that you can do both at once, or do you just get the experience that you get from say work for like 2-3 years, then go into entrepreneurship as an individual?
Can I, this may come as a shock, but everything you've learned is useless until you apply it. Because once you start to apply the knowledge that you have, you realize that everything else was theoretical, and you come into the real world and you start to do it in a different way. But without that knowledge, you couldn't do that. But you have to start to apply what you've learned and adjust to what you've learned. As to whether you think, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to finish my course and go and be an entrepreneur, that's an awfully difficult thing to do, because you need backing, you need finance, you need ideas, you need a corporation, you need a marketing plan, you need a manufacturing plan. So what I would say, above all else, is go and get some experience first. See how a business runs. See how you can take the knowledge that you've been given and you've learnt and apply it and adapt it. And when you've done that, you'll begin to formulate ideas. If you are a genuine entrepreneur, you'll begin to formulate ideas on how you can take it forward. When I was in the timber industry, I was sick of timber being sold as a commodity. It was like coffee and sugar and potatoes. It was just, here's a lump of wood. So I worked with sawmills in Scandinavia, in Canada, and in Scotland, in England. And we came up with an entirely different way of selling timber. And I persuaded them to run their huge sawmills in an entirely different way to the way they've ever done it before. And I promised them they would make more profit. But when they did, I wanted 5% of it for my company for giving them the idea. And that's what we did, and it was incredibly successful. And we did things in very, very different ways. But I couldn't have done that. I did it for another company, I didn't do it for myself. But you can't do that without the learning that you've had, without looking at things and analysing things as you're working in business. So my advice to you, 100%, is go and get some experience first in an industry that you love. Because it's really important. I'm really fortunate. I honestly cannot remember a morning when I felt, I really don't want to get out of bed today. I
can.
I went through my whole career, and from a young lad of 15. Well, actually, there were times when I was a youngster, but from a young lad of 15 until I retired when I was 53, and I leapt out. Sometimes I was jumping out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning to catch a plane at 6 o'clock, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed every second that I was working. And sometimes, you're knocked backwards, but you've got to find a way forwards, because there is always a way forwards. Go and get some experience, but in something that you genuinely want to do.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. It's got to be, if you've got an idea for a business that you want to run, go and work in a similar business. Go and look at whatever element it is. If it's making shoes, if it's setting up a hospice or a hospital of some sort, go and work in some element of that business. And actually, if you're weak on accounts, if you're weak on marketing, if you're weak on selling, go and try and get a job in those areas to try and strengthen what you do, so that you're layering up your knowledge. You're not going to become the best accountant in the world, but you will at least start to understand how businesses operate financially. you may not be the best salesman in the world, but you will understand what's needed and what a great salesman looks like for when you recruit one later.
You're looking at one.
I know. Clearly, he's coming to work for me.
No,
what can I say?
The financial side is really important. You don't. Management accounts, you need to understand how they work. Profit and loss account, you need to understand. Balance sheets, you need to understand. You need to understand how the banking system works and how companies work their finance. But you don't need it in detail. You just need a good understanding of it. You need to be able to spot things that are in there. I've got a 12-year-old grandson, and he said to me 2 weeks ago, I'm setting up my own website, Gramps. I said, what for? He said, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. So I said, where are you going to buy your stuff from? Guess where he's buying it from? China.
I'd just like to throw one thing in, and because obviously this is a Changemaker event as well. And a lot of people get stuck in this business is business and community is community. And it isn't. So a lot of businesses now are starting to look at that whole picture of their impacting community, but also their impact on the environment, their impact on people. And they're starting to move away from what they call corporate social responsibility into ethical practice, governance, and the more longer term sort of collaborations that may stimulate local communities to grow themselves through the interactivity with the business. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about, which is why I'm here today as in the role I'm in, is how can we transfer entrepreneurism into the community as well. So it's not always looking for the next sort of widget, app, or whatever it might be. It can equally be something that's broken in society that allows you to look at it and say, right, I think I've got the working parts. And I very much think in sort of sparkles. So if somebody that can do something technologically can be brought to the table, somebody that can do the banking, somebody that has a network that we could access, somebody can open up channels for money. Before you know it, an entrepreneur can bring things together to change the world. And you can use business to do that because then it becomes self-sustaining. So don't always look for the next business idea or the label, I'm an entrepreneur, and they put it all over LinkedIn. It's what is an entrepreneur when you break it down from the course that you're on and say, an entrepreneur is somebody that can pull things together as well. Doesn't have to just start a business. They can be a force for good. And that might be where you want to test your skills as well.
And one thing I would say, whatever you do, make sure you do it because you thoroughly enjoy it, not because of potential rewards.
Yeah.
Because the biggest reward you can possibly get is happiness and satisfaction.
Yeah.
And achievement, way beyond money.
Totally.
Right, we're going to need to finish because we could be here until tomorrow. I'd like to thank, from my side anyway, both of you for coming and sharing your insights and making this such a fun session, which I'm sure the whole of the audience and those
well, it was fun for us. The people listening are going, "Oh, I've fallen asleep."
Going on. That's really helped us. This is the first of its kind in a podcast series, which spans two of our faculties and my own area of work as well.
Okay.
And the idea of what you've been talking about is that our students can actually use this as a live resource to learn from.
Thank you very much, Lucy and Ron. Yes, the information you've given, sharing your experience from when you started into COVID and how you both kept reminding us to believe and
in
believe
yourself
and believe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a wrap.